While today's race wasn't on the same level as last week's, there was plenty of talking points from the first ever Styrian Grand Prix as the championship battle at the top continues to heat up. Welcome back to the Formula One Grid Talk podcast. Today we'll be reviewing today's pretty good Styrian Grand Prix and looking forward to next weekend's Hungarian Grand Prix. We are powered by the F1 Chronicle. Visit f1chronicle.com for news, reviews and opinions on all things F1. Hosting today will be me, George Howson, and joining me today are sports journalist Louis Edwards.
Hello.
F1 expert Alex Booth.
Hello.
And sports journalist Mikael Kataja.
Hey.
So lads, it was an eventful race. It had a potential to be a bit of a dull one, but the end of it was absolutely electric. We will get into all that as we go on through this. But we'll start with the winner of the race, Lewis Hamilton. And Louis, this was absolutely vital for his title defence, as obviously he had a bit of a gap to Valtteri Bottas, and he was just untouchable today.
Yeah, it was a classic Lewis Hamilton performance. Dominated it from lap one, maintained a very good sort of gap to Verstappen, who was he was struggling somewhat, and he just controlled the race. Didn't have any issues like they were looking like they had last week, and yeah. Overall, it was just pretty good.
Pretty good by his standards, yeah. I think that's win number 85 for his career. He's just 6 off of Michael Schumacher's all-time record. I think qualifying is arguably where he really shone this weekend. I mean, 1.2 seconds faster than anybody else to get pole position. Just, I mean, obviously we got some incredible drivers in the field, but Hamilton yesterday was just on another level to everybody else, and today he did exactly what he needed to close that gap up to 6 points to Valtteri Bottas. But yeah, Mikael, your man Valtteri Bottas is, I think he did all he could really. He started 4th or 5th on the grid.
4th,
yeah, and he got 2nd place in the end. I mean, it wasn't easy for him though. He had to chase down Max Verstappen in the closing stages.
Yeah, I mean, I think today was only about just mitigating the damage basically and making sure that Hamilton couldn't get too many points back in the championship. So yeah, I mean, Valtteri did a good job. I started becoming skeptical of Mercedes' plan of keeping him out for so long after Verstappen and Hamilton had pitted, but I mean, it turned out fine. Yeah, a little bit scared with Verstappen coming back on the outside to turn 4, but yeah, that was good. Ended well, but there's still a lot of work to do if he wants to beat Hamilton this year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he leads the championship by 6 points, but he's got to win another race soon, you think, because obviously last year he started quite well as well, but the gap just got further and further as the year went on, as Hamilton really asserted his dominance on the season. But yeah, Alex, I mean, Max Verstappen, I think in a way a bit unlucky with the wing damage in the closing stages. He could have held off Bottas potentially had he not got that. But at the end of the day, that Mercedes, even compared to the Red Bull, it's just a league above, really.
Well, it is. You saw today that Hamilton was in a league of his own, and Bottas, I think, had he qualified better than 4th, he wouldn't have had such a hard drive as he had done. But Verstappen, well, what we need to look at that race is the fact that Verstappen was with the Mercedes all afternoon. He was in the early stage of the race. He was only 5 seconds behind Lewis, and he was keeping him in his sight. And yet he finished. I can't remember how far it was ahead of Albon, but he was miles ahead of him. And it shows just the ability he got. And Red Bull quite clearly didn't have the race pace that Mercedes do, but Max drove the wheels off that car all day, and thorough respect to the man, he drove a fantastic race.
Yeah, he did all he could. He was driving absolutely on the limit, and that's why he got that wing damage, running over some curves around turn 7, something like that, I think it was. But yeah, you mentioned the gap between him and Albon. It was actually 11 seconds by the finish, but obviously Verstappen pitted in the latter stages. It was about half a minute, and Louis, I mean, yeah, Albon held off Perez, which I guess is commendable in the last stages, but that's a big gap to his teammate. I think, yeah, it's only 1 place, but it's a huge time gap between him and Verstappen.
Yeah, it wasn't the best showing from Albon today. He seemed to be struggling, and then it's just towards the back end of that race really started to slip into that midfield battle that was going on behind him. As you said, I think he was very lucky that he was able to hold off Perez the way he did, and then of course Perez had the wing damage, which sort of ended his chances of grabbing that 4th place. But yeah, I think he's very lucky to get that 4th place in the end. Hopefully going into Hungary, we could see a little bit more of what we saw in the first race.
Yeah, I mean, the Red Bull should perform well around the Hungaroring. I mean, Hamilton and Verstappen had an incredible duel there last year, and being a more high downforce circuit, you think it would suit the Red Bull a bit more. But yeah, Mercedes was 2 from 2. I think Red Bull will be disappointed with that, but it's not overly surprised either. The 5th place today, I mean, it really didn't seem like he would get 5th in the end. He dropped out of the points for a little bit, and it was just an incredible late surge by him. Fantastic driving. He got a podium last week, but I think this was arguably more impressive, Mikael. 5th place for Lando Norris, and getting the racing points and the Renault on the line, really.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it seems that McLaren are doing very good at the latter half of the stage. I mean, both cars, Sainz getting the fastest lap as well. But, I mean, the Norris's last 5 laps, I mean, catching up to Stroll and Ricciardo, and then not only getting past them, of course, Stroll did make kind of a stupid move against Ricciardo, so that did help. But the fact that he was able to get past them, and then with Perez's, I would say, unfortunate wing damage, snapping at 5th, I mean, hey, he's 3rd in the championship standing, so we'll see how far he can make it.
Yeah, unbelievable. Lando Norris is 3rd in the standings, and a clear 3rd as well. I mean, he's 8 points ahead of Charles Leclerc, who did not score today. We will get into exactly why he and his teammate did not score today. It was a very bad day for the Italian Tifosi today. Not what they wanted at all. But yeah, we will get onto that. 6th place, Alex, Sergio Perez, but it could have and possibly should have been more from him. I mean, where did he start? Was it 18th or something like that? And 17th. And he was challenging Albon for 4th. I mean, I've said it to Mario Asolo, the guy who's head of Pirelli's F1 tyre division. You know, Perez just saved his tyres. I think he saved his soft tyres for about 40 laps. Same, Lando Norris did the same thing as well. He was absolutely lightning quick in the latter stages. He even broke the fastest lap of the race several times too.
He's always been known for that. He was well known for his time management since his first Grand Prix in 2011 with the Sauber. As I've said before on the podcast several times, I've always rated Perez, although it was a rather clumsy move on Albon towards the end, although I suppose he had to go for it, and it shows the racing instinct, and one can't deny that. But he drove a fantastic race today. One could argue that maybe if he started higher up the grid, it could have been better, but there's always a problem that, you know, if you start outside the top 10, you get a different tyre strategy than, whereas if you start in the top 10, you have to qualify on the tyres you use P3. Although it was raining yesterday, so that's wrong. But I've totally contradicted myself there.
It was a manic end to the race, wasn't it? So you can be forgiven.
I'll rephrase that. If he started further up the grid, then yeah, he could have had an even better race than he would have done. But at the same time, he gave us a very entertaining performance, coming from 17th to 5th, and it was a demonstration of his racecraft and ability to slap the tyres.
Yeah, and we saw quite a few inter-team battles today. There was one between him and Lance Stroll, but Stroll didn't give it up. But Perez properly went for it and got the place. Fair play to him. In a way, lucky to finish it because, yes, his front wing wasn't quite gone, but there wasn't much left of it either. He lost about 20 seconds in the last stages, but that just shows you the kind of advantage he built up. I mean, he was just so quick. He was so quick in the later stages when he was catching Albon, and yeah, maybe unlucky, maybe shouldn't have gone for the move. Who knows? It's a very tight track, Austria around the corners. So I guess you could say he had to go for it, but very encouraging for Racing Point, who also got 7th place as well, Louis, with Lance Stroll. And solid race for the Canadian. I mean, but I think the disappointing thing, if anything, for me, he did get past Ricciardo at the very end. I think pending an investigation. I'm not sure if that's finished or not. There's no punishment now.
No.
Okay, well, so he will finish 7th. But he didn't seem quite assertive enough in his overtakes. He was trying to get past Ricciardo, but he couldn't quite manage it.
Yeah, it was, as you said, it was a good day at the office. You know, he did climb positions. And, you know, Stroll has always had good race pace. It's qualifying where he's always struggled. And, you know, now that he's been given this really competitive car, I think he's really starting to show, you know, just what he's capable of. But, yeah, it was an ambitious move. It was a very Daniel Ricciardo move on Daniel Ricciardo at the end. Really licked the stamp and sent it. But yeah, I think he should have been a bit more mindful, considering that he would have known that Lando was going to be catching very quickly and was in DRS range of him going up to turn 3. So maybe be a bit more reserved and, you know, just try and get his best exit out of turn 3 as possible, and then just maybe hold on for a bit longer.
Yeah, didn't quite work out for him. Didn't quite get the position in the end, but he ended up in 7th. Not a bad day at the office, but it could have and probably should have been a lot more for Racing Point, who honestly, with the way that Ferrari are going this year, they've got a genuine chance of getting third in the Constructors' Championship, but they've got to score better points. They've got to convert it better. 8th place, Daniel Ricciardo, and again, another guy who probably should have been further up the order, but encouraging pace from Renault today.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fine race, I would say. I mean, he finished where he started on 8th place. I mean, again, thinking about Renault, the fact that they had to retire Ocon, I actually didn't catch why, but the fact that they retired him is concerning. But for Ricciardo, I mean, it was a fine day in the office, I guess. Had some good fights with Ocon and then with Stroll. And I mean, he was able to keep Stroll behind him for many laps after Perez passed them both. So fair play to him. And then the final move from Stroll, I mean, it was deemed a racing incident. So fair enough. A bit unfortunate that he lost 2 spots on that one. But yeah, 8th place, 4 points. And he goes off to Hungary with at least some points.
Yeah, he's on the board at least, but concerning for Renault with the mechanical unreliability. I think as well, Renault should potentially look at their team tactics as well. I mean, Ricciardo should have been let past Ocon earlier than what he did. I think he did let him go eventually, I think, but it took a good few laps and that cost him vital time. He could have been all the way up in 5th by the end, Ricciardo, but he's ended up 8th. That's how it goes sometimes in Formula One. It's a cruel mistress when it wants to be.
I wonder if it's maybe because Ricciardo is leaving the team. You know, maybe the French outfit just wants to help their French boy a little bit further.
Just like Rosberg in the Mercedes days, German driver, right. German team. It's a conspiracy.
They certainly didn't let him go as well, did he? He had to work for it. No.
Yeah.
I
mean, I don't want to go too much into it. We will mention what the driver changes coming up. It does seem like they just seem to invest in guys and then they just give them up. Like it seemed like Hülkenberg was meant to be the guy that took their team to the next level. They got rid of him. Then it was meant to be Ricciardo. They're going to get rid of him. And then they're saying Ocon, and now Alonso from next year. I mean, who's next? I saw a meme that said Mika Häkkinen's the next guy that's the future of Renault. That made me look at us. Oh man. But yeah, so 9th place and fastest lap, new lap record for, of all the people, Carlos Sainz, another fastest lap for McLaren, Alex. I mean, it did seem for a while as though McLaren wouldn't do too well in this race. That they seem to be struggling against the Renaults and the racing points, but they've ended up with a good result here. And again, there's some serious pace in that car.
It is. In the early stage of the race, McLaren was struggling because Sainz had qualified 3rd, and he's had a very good start as well. I mean, it looked like he'd almost got past Verstappen at one stage, and then he got passed by Albon, and he slowly started to fall back on the top 3. But they did that clever tactical manoeuvre where they allowed Norris to overtake Sainz, and Sainz had a free pit stop in the end, and that was a good decision because it allowed him to pit and put fresh tyres on and get the fastest lap, which we've seen several times since that rule has been put in, where you can gain 1 extra point for setting the fastest lap. It's been done a couple of times. McLaren played that trick very well today. And Norris at the end of the race, with slightly lucky again with whatever happened in front of him with Perez, but he was there where he needed to be. And so another terrific day for McLaren. And it shows that they definitely are on the right track.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And McLaren, believe it or not, are still 2nd in the Constructors' Championship. They are 12 points ahead of Red Bull. It's a decent gap. They've got, I mean, I said about Racing Point potentially getting 3rd this year. McLaren could be that. You never know.
Pace in that car, definitely. There is pace in that car.
There's some serious pace in that car, yeah. I mean, Sainz as well was unlucky with his pit stop. His first pit stop was about 7 or 8 seconds or so. What sticky rear left, I think it was. That cost him a good few time and positions. But 9th place, yes, but he did get the fastest lap. So there is that. It's a bit of a saving grace. A decent day in the office for McLaren when it could have been a lot worse. And you think they'll do well around Hungary too, because that Renault is not the fastest in the straight line. But there you go. Yeah, 10th place. And a guy who kind of went under the radar, Louis. I mean, Gasly stole the headlines in qualifying, but Kvyat did the job in the race. He's got his first point of the season with 10.
Yeah, it was a very, very quiet. I don't think possibly saw a single shot of Kvyat throughout the entire race. He was
apart from when he was being lapped, that was it.
Yeah. Oh, look, it's Kvyat. But yeah, it's just those kind of drives are the ones you want. You're completely understated. You just want to go around, do your business, get a point, and go home happy. That AlphaTauri just seems to be a bit of a bang average sort of bottom end of the points car this season, and for the last 2 races they've got those points, so can't really complain too much.
No, we can't do. I mean, they're doing all right. To be fair, they're whereabouts you'd expect to be. I think they made a bit of a blunder with the hard tyres today, but Kvyat managed to stick it out. Gasly really struggled on those hard tyres and had to pit it for a second time. There you go. Now, 11th, and a guy that, again, another person you just kind of got was in the race, Kimi Räikkönen, but one place off points in that Alfa Romeo is no mean feat, Mikael, and he could have got 10th as well if Giovinazzi let him go earlier.
Yeah, and I mean, he was unfortunate to get stuck behind the two Ferraris in turn 3 on the first lap. He completely almost stalled his car there, and dropped to last place behind everyone. Yeah, it was a solid day. I mean, the thing is, he's the best positioned driver with a Ferrari engine, which also tells you something about the state of the Ferrari engine at the moment. The fact that they couldn't score any points today. Yeah, it was a fine day. The fact that he was able to, he had some really close calls with Magnussen, I think, on the last laps. Hope to see him on the points. I hope he'll make that in Hungary next week. But it was an okay result, and that's it, probably.
Yeah, it'd be disappointing not to get points. I mean, that is something I never thought about, Mikael. Like that. Wait, I bet it's been a very long time since a Ferrari-powered engine has not scored a point in a race. I mean,
it's incredible. I didn't realize it before. I just read it on Twitter a little bit before we started recording. It's incredible the fact that they couldn't score a single point today. I mean, obviously, the one car they could hope for, which is Leclerc or Vettel, got each other retired in the first lap. But even the rest of the field, Haas, Alfa Romeo, no points for Ferrari engines.
Yeah, the Ferrari engine cars are really struggling this year. I mean, we said it after qualifying for Austria last week. They're, on average, they're over a second slower than they were last year, while all the other cars have improved a little bit. That's a massive swing in pace. I mean, yeah, Alfa Romeo and Haas both struggling. I guess the only noteworthy thing about Haas this weekend, Alex, is they didn't manage to crash into each other or anything like David Cross said in the commentary. 12th for Magnussen, 13th for Grosjean. All they could really hope for. Just the car's just not quite fast enough.
It's not been a great start for Haas, and they've had that recurring problem with the brakes, and I think we saw that in the race today as well. Grosjean, you could see his brakes are fading as they're going to turn 3, and there's just no pace in that car at all, is there? They've never seemed to crack the top 10 at any point in the weekend. Certainly not on pure pace. Maybe that's due with the Ferrari engine as well at the moment. But yeah, it's dark days at the moment for Haas, and it's really worrying.
Yeah, they were on an upward trend before last season. They seem to be on a downward trend at the moment. But part of the problem for them is their engine. That Ferrari engine. It's no coincidence that the Alfas and Alfa Romeos and the Ferrari and the Haas are all struggling compared to last year. It's the engine, partly. I mean, obviously, yes, they do have brake issues too, but the engine doesn't help either. Giovinazzi ended up in 14th place, pretty average race for him. He kept Kimi Räikkönen behind for a decent amount of it, but yeah, in the end, 14th for him. Gasly was in the points in the early stages, had an amazing qualifying yesterday, but today not really there. Struggled on the hard tyres. And 16th place, George Russell, Louis, and I really feel for this guy. I feel for him so much because he did an incredible job in qualifying yesterday. All to just effectively end any chance after the first few laps.
Yeah, qualified 12th, started the race 11th. I think he was almost in the points at one point. He was really scrapping away on the opening lap. But then he was just starting to lose out a bit, and it was just, oh no, he's dropping back. And then I think when he was battling into either turn 5 or turn 6, he was just trying to go around the outside and just lost it, put it in the gravel, and that was it. Race over. Chances for points were over, and it was such a shame because he'd worked so hard and he's done so well, and just for it to go away like that, it was painful just to watch. And then he was stuck behind Latifi for quite a lot of the race. He was usually just sort of within about a second of Latifi for a lot of the race, but eventually finished ahead of him.
Yeah, ended up 16th for the end, ahead of Latifi, which is a very, very small crumb of comfort for him. He could have got points today. You never know. But I think with the pace of that, Williams, he would have really struggled to keep behind the Alpha Tauris and maybe even the Alfa Romeos and the Haas. Williams is still probably the worst car in the grid, but in the hands of Russell, he can at least make it competitive with the other drivers. Yeah, so I mean, let's go on. I mean, we have 3 retirements for this race. We'll cover the non-controversial one first. Esteban Ocon. I mean, unlucky, unfortunately. I mean, we touched on him before, Mikael. He went out of the race because of some mechanical issue. We don't really know what. Probably what caused the retirement for Ricciardo last week. But it's impressive that he's managed to step into this car after over a year and a half out and be competitive.
Yeah, I mean, he was doing well with fighting Ricciardo in the laps, and I mean, his qualifying yesterday was amazing. The fact that he was able to get 5th or start 5th today shows that he is kind of catching up after being a year away from the grid. Yeah, it was a good start of a race for him, but yeah, unfortunately, he got cut short.
Unfortunately for him, yeah, but he did manage to get points last weekend. So and that Renault is decent. It's decent in the points. You know, it's in that echelon below the Red Bulls and the Mercedes. I think you've got Renault, McLaren, Racing Point, and Ferrari. I'm being generous to Ferrari to put them in that group, to be honest, but I think they are probably there because of their drivers. But yeah, so Alex, Leclerc and Vettel crashing again. I think it was Ruby. By the way, thank you to Ruby and Owain for commenting in our chat. Really do appreciate it. I think it was Ruby who predicted that the Ferraris would come together at some point during last weekend's race. He was just a week off with that. It's just a desperate state of affairs. You could sort of live with it if the car was quick, but it's not even that. They were well off in qualifying again.
Well, my most abiding memory of that race today was you saw the shot of the 2 Ferraris in the pit lane, both damaged, and that just about summed up Ferrari's entire weekend, essentially. Good questions were asked after qualifying. Could it get any worse for Ferrari? And yes, it could. It was an ambitious move, I think, by Leclerc on around the first lap of the race. You can't win it on the first lap, but I suppose you're going to get stuck in starting from that far behind. He wanted to make an impression, and unfortunately, it didn't work out for him. I've got to say, I totally respect him for his interviews afterwards. At least fair play to the guy. Admits when he's wrong, and I give him credit for that. But I dread to think what's happening in the Ferrari debrief at the moment. Fireworks, I would imagine. It's hard to see a team with that much heritage and the amount of success they've had reduced to this. I don't understand how this is possible. Like the engine's not very good, the chassis is poor, and the drivers are taking each other out. It can't get any worse for them at all.
It's a sad state of affairs, but it really is. I thought with the rain yesterday, I thought that might have helped them because I thought, right, okay, the engine's down on power, obviously from last year. What's going to try and equalise that for them? Rain. The power's less important there, but they were just off it again. I mean, Leclerc legitimately knocked out of Q2, and Vettel 10th, and I think it was half a second off Ricciardo in 9th. It's just nowhere, absolutely nowhere. And like Ruby's just mentioned in the chat now, their upgrades, which they fast-tracked for this weekend, they're going to have no data on. So they have no idea if they work or not. So their desperate attempt to try and improve the car has just failed.
It has, but it's almost as if the drivers have just got no confidence in that car. That probably explains in qualifying why, as you mentioned, in the rain it's meant to be an equaliser. But I get the impression that Vettel and Leclerc are just so unhappy with that car that they can't showcase their ability with it. It just they're not getting anything from it, and that's the problem that Ferrari have got at the moment.
Yeah, it's a massive issue. It's just the car is just off. I mean, Owain mentioned it in preseason testing. They just whacked on a load of aerodynamics to try and improve the grip through the corners. They just made loads of drag, and then the engine's obviously not as powerful as last year because they've had to make changes to make it legal. Not officially, of course, but that's obviously what's happened. And now there is no top 3. There is no top 3 constructors. There's top 2. There's Mercedes and Red Bull. And then below that, you have McLaren, Renault, Racing Point, and Ferrari. And out of those 4 teams, Ferrari's probably the slowest. I mean, on pure pace, they're going to probably struggle to score points around Hungary, Louis. I mean, unless those upgrades that they're bringing work, it's hard to see them really challenging for the podium again.
Yeah, it's really sad actually. It's that we're not seeing. Every year feels like Liverpool would promise every year we'll see something, and then, they get there and they're not there, and it's frustrating. But yeah. Their chances are Hungary. They've got to hope that these upgrades bring probably half a second to their car, if they're going to be realistic. Because Hungary's a tough track to overtake. It's quite tight. in places. You've got probably the main straight and maybe turn 2, probably your best places of overtaking. But yeah, when they're down on power, they've got heaps of drag. We thought, they're going to have a lot of downforce and their downforce package is going to be good. Yet we didn't see that in the wet. It's definitely time for Ferrari, engineers to really start racking their brain and coming up with a real solution for this.
It's a sad situation, isn't it? To quote the song, it's Ferrari just miles off. You never know; they could get a big heap of performance at Hungary, but given how this season's gone so far, that's doubtful. I mean, Mikael, you could have a say on it as well. I mean, it's just, I think quite a few people are thinking, right, Mercedes probably going to have the best car this year. Red Bull will probably challenge them, but Ferrari is still going to at least be third in the constructors. But they've got a real job on to try and match that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, going back to the situation that Leclerc and Vettel had, the crash, I mean, it's tough to see, at least for me, what Leclerc was thinking that would come out of that situation. I mean, had they not crashed, I still don't think he would have passed Vettel. So kind of a needless move. But yeah, as you've already mentioned, at least, he owned up to his mistake. One thing about those upgrades that we haven't seen the effect, but I doubt that are working too well. I mean, we have Mugello coming up in, I think, September at some point. If they go there and they qualify 11th and 10th, I mean, how can you justify that? I mean, regardless of what kind of a beating they're going to get in Monza, I mean, in Mugello, if they don't manage to fight for the podium there, that means Binotto has to go. I don't see any other way they're going to come back to next year at that point.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think, if anything, the power problem is bigger than the aerodynamics problem. That's a bigger problem to fix as well for them. And obviously, Monza is the fastest circuit on the calendar. And apart from maybe Mugello, which has just joined, I mean, that's going to be incredibly quick. I mean, how humiliating is it going to be for Ferrari to legitimately finish behind the racing points in Monza and Mugello?
The overriding story of today is, apart from the incident between the two drivers, is if that hadn't have happened, there's no question that Ferrari, would they have beaten Racing Point? No. Would they have beaten McLaren? No. Would they have beaten Red Bull? Absolutely not. They'd have probably been around the AlphaTauri sort of point, and that was the bottom reach. That's the single digit point, and the bottom edge of that at best. And for Ferrari, that's unacceptable, completely. And there's no way that they're going to stand for that for much longer.
Heads will roll, I think. Obviously, Vettel's going at the end of the year, but yeah, I think the next person to go would be Binotto. Ferrari team prince. I mean, Arriva Bene got sacked when they finished third, I think, in the constructors, or second. So Binotto's going to go if they finish like fifth or sixth, like no doubt. He'll struggle to see out the season, to be honest, at that rate. But yeah. So Ferrari really struggling. That podium last weekend for Leclerc really, really flatters how well they've been, how their pace is. I don't know how he did it, to be honest with you, even more looking back on that. But yeah, so I think we'll leave got one more thing to do actually, sorry, before we get into the preview for Hungary. The driver of the day. Now, my driver of the day would have been Sergio Perez apart from the last few laps. But instead, I think again, I'm going to give it to Lando Norris. I just think that surge at the end of the race. And he did break the lap record as well, just before Sainz did, I believe. So he had ridiculous pace to get that fifth in the end. Louis, who are you saying?
I'm going to stick with Sergio Perez. It's, even though he did have that contact at the end of the race, it's still an amazing achievement. Start 17th, finish 6th. That is still a spectacular drive from a very talented driver in a very quick car.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd love to see him in the top team to one day, but I feel like his time may have passed for that, unfortunately. Mikael, who was your driver of the day?
I'm going to have to go with Perez as well. Louis already mentioned the fact of how he rose from 17th to finish 6th, but in all honesty, even if he had fallen behind Ricciardo on 8th, he was just unlucky with the fact that his almost entire front wing got damaged in the overtaking opportunity. But yeah, still top job for him today, and hope to see more next week.
Alex?
Very brief, but I agree with all three of you. Can't list anything more than that. I think you've covered that perfectly. That's exactly what I'm thinking.
Fair enough. So yeah, thank you for joining us, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the live streams. We've got a few more viewers this time. We will be bringing you the preview for Hungary, so don't go anywhere. But yeah, thank you for listening to this episode. We are also available on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Omni Studio, Pocket Cast. Just search for the F1 Grid Talk on all of those. And of course, we are available on the F1 Chronicle website, where we have official merchandise. We've got t-shirts, we've got mugs with some funny quotes from Kimi Räikkönen, Gunther Steiner, Danny Ricciardo, people like that. So you find some funny quotes in there. We also have a Reddit, new F1 podcast, looking for feedback, and a subreddit as well for the F1 Grid Talk if you want to get a discussion going. Obviously, we do have Twitch as well. Just search for the F1 Grid Talk on there, where you can see these shows recorded as they are, as live. And finally, we have a Patreon as well if you want to invest in new lights and cameras and microphones. We do really appreciate that. And yes, we'll be back on Wednesday with a preview for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll see you for the next one. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.